There's a question Playtime Company never wanted you to ask. Not about the experiments, not about play care, not about what happened in 1995. This question comes before all of that, and the answer changes every single detail of what you think you know about this company. What if the doll had never woken up? Because there's something most people forget when they talk about Poppy Playtime. Before she was the voice guiding you through the hallways, before she was Experiment 1007, she was a little girl. And when that little girl died, her father did something that should never have worked, but it did. That moment, the instant the porcelain blinked and the consciousness came back, was what shaped everything that followed. Today, the question is simple. What happens if that moment never comes? The year is 1960. Playtime Company has existed for 30 years, and Elliot Ludwig is already carrying more than any man should. The factory was running. The toys were selling. The company's name appeared in Christmas catalogs across the country. From the outside, everything was exactly what it looked like. From the inside, Elliot was a man who had lost the only thing that made the rest of it mean anything. He had already done the impossible once. Oliver, the boy he had adopted years before, now existed inside a structure that shouldn't have been possible. The prototype, Experiment 1006, proved that human consciousness could be transferred. That death was not necessarily the end. Elliot had felt the weight and the horror of what he had done to his adopted son, and kept going anyway. Because on the other side of that atrocity was the possibility of bringing Poppy back. He prepared the procedure with the care of a man who cannot afford to fail. And he failed. The porcelain doll remained silent. No response, no recognition. Elliot sat in the room he had built specifically for his daughter, just a few feet from his own office, holding the doll in his arms as though the warmth of his hands could finish what the science could not. He stayed there for hours. The lower floor of the factory kept running. The machines kept pressing plastic and stitching plush and sealing joy into colorful boxes. And Elliot Ludwig sat in the silence of that empty room, slowly coming to understand that he had turned his son into a monster for nothing. But he didn't stop. That is the most important detail. In the years that followed, Elliot tried to repeat the procedure. He studied his notes, he adjusted variables. He went back to that room night after night, sat in the chair beside the doll, and spoke to it in a low voice, as though Poppy's consciousness might be hiding somewhere inside, waiting for a frequency he hadn't found yet. The people who worked closest to him noticed the change. The founder, who used to walk the factory floor in his work clothes and greet every employee by name, was slowly replaced by a man who arrived before dawn, locked himself in his office, and didn't come out until the night shift had already started. Every failed attempt generated data. Every piece of data generated more attempts. And while all of this happened behind closed doors, Playtime Company kept its routine of $2.99 factory tours, Christmas catalogs, and smiles printed on colorful packaging. When Elliot died in 1989, the authorities who searched his property found evidence of what those years of failure had cost. A body, missing organs. The kind of discovery that raises questions no one inside the company was prepared to answer publicly. But Elliot was already dead, and Playtime Company's lawyers moved fast enough to make sure those questions never found an echo. What died with Elliot wasn't just a man. It was the only version of this company that still operated from a motivation that, however distorted it had become, had its roots in love. What came next wouldn't even have that excuse. If you think the story gets simpler from here, it doesn't. Keep watching. Leith Pierre took control of Playtime Company weeks later after investigating an electrical incident at Playcare. That's how he found the two secrets Elliot had left behind: the prototype and a room with an empty porcelain doll. He wasn't disturbed. He was interested. In January 1990, Leith hired Dr. Harley Sawyer as head of special projects. Harley was ambitious, pragmatic, and completely free of the guilt that had consumed Elliot in his final years. Where Elliot saw a daughter who hadn't come back, Harley saw a variable that hadn't been isolated yet. "What we have here is enough to get started," Harley said during one of their first meetings, turning through Elliot's notebooks with the expression of someone taking inventory. Enough to get started isn't enough to get it right. Leith didn't concern himself with the second part.
The concrete problem was this. In the original timeline, Harley would have had two experiments to study: the prototype and Poppy. Two cases with distinct characteristics that, compared against each other, would have allowed him to calibrate the procedures with a precision that a single success simply couldn't offer. In this version of events, he only had Oliver. One point on a map doesn't trace a route. It traces a guess. The Bigger Bodies Initiative was born from exactly that. Not from certainty, but from a bet. Harley took Elliot's incomplete data and converted it into a structured program with defined objectives, approved budgets, and a steady supply of subjects drawn from Playcare, the orphanage Elliot had opened in 1976 with the stated intention of giving children who had nowhere to go a place to call home. The distance between that stated intention and its actual use is where Playtime Company's horror has always lived. Without Experiment 1007 as a second reference point, the BBI's early experiments produced failures Harley hadn't anticipated. Every failure had a cost. Every cost had a name that no one inside the company ever said out loud. Employees who asked questions were reassigned. Reports documenting the inconsistencies were classified. And somewhere inside the factory, the prototype watched all of it. With a patience that wasn't resignation, it was strategy. Oliver had been Elliot's first test subject. He knew what the company did to children because he had been one of those children. That memory was the core of his resistance, and it existed independently of anything else. In the original timeline, Poppy's presence inside the factory added urgency to that resistance. There was a bond between them, built from shared origin, from involuntary immortality, from the experience of being the first to exist in a territory no human being had ever crossed before. That bond pushed the prototype to act within a time frame he wouldn't have chosen on his own. In this version of events, that bond never forms. What that changes is not the prototype's objectives. What it changes is the pace. Without Poppy's presence compressing the clock, the prototype moves slower, deeper, further from any radar. He learns the patterns of every experiment the BBI produces. He logs the failures Harley classifies. He maps the corridors that employees avoid mentioning in their reports. And while Playtime Company builds its new machinery on a foundation it doesn't fully understand, the one being who knows that foundation better than anyone moves through the lower floors in silence, waiting for the moment when the map is complete. What the prototype would have done with that additional time is something the lore doesn't answer. But the question itself says something about the kind of threat a company without Poppy would have been facing. The question the title asked was what Playtime Company would have become without Poppy Ludwig. The answer isn't a better company, and it isn't a company spared from its own fate. It's a company that builds the Bigger Bodies Initiative on incomplete data, that absorbs a higher human cost in the process of trial and error, and that operates without the internal dynamic Poppy's presence created among the experiments. A company that moves forward more blind, at a speed it can't fully control. Poppy didn't save Playtime Co. from its own nature, but she was part of the balance that determined how and when that nature revealed itself to the world. Without her, the room beside Elliot Ludwig's office would have stayed empty forever. The porcelain doll would have aged in silence, blue eyes fixed on the ceiling, while down below, the factory kept running and the prototype kept waiting. Two beings Elliot had created out of love and out of desperation, each in their own way, each carrying the weight of what he had done. One of them never woke up. The other never forgot. And Playtime Company kept going.